You've seen the interview. Gunplay, once signed to Rick Ross, laughing about what he did to make it. Offerings, animals, and beating a felony on camera. Not with a lawyer, but with a wrapped tongue and the words, "It's done." The internet laughed. I couldn't. I was at that 4-day Florida trial years ago. I watched a man caught on camera committing armed robbery walk free in 91 minutes. Closer to it than anyone. He says these rituals are real and drive the industry. He has no idea how much deeper it goes. The reason I lost my certification is a 4-day trial in Courtroom 6C. And the reason I never told anyone in a position to do anything about it is that the only evidence I have is my own transcript. And my transcript is a lie. I typed it. I certified it. My signature is on the bottom of every page. And the pages describe a normal trial. And there is a stretch inside those pages I have no memory of typing. So I want to be upfront about the position that puts me in. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm telling you why I never asked anyone else to. I was a court reporter in Broward County for 11 years. Stenographer, transcriptionist, whatever word makes sense to you. The job is the same no matter what you call it. You learn to hear without listening. 225 words a minute goes through your hands without stopping in the middle of your brain. And that's not a flaw in the job. That's the whole skill of it. The best day I ever had at that job, I couldn't have told you afterward what the case was even about. You are furniture that types. That's the phrase we use for ourselves, half joking. I want you to sit with that phrase for a second because I think it's the only reason I got to see what I saw. Nobody performs for the furniture. Nobody adjusts what they're doing because the stenographer might notice. You're not a person in the room. You're a machine with a pulse. And after 11 years, I had gotten so good at disappearing that I disappeared for real. The case that August was an armed robbery, gas station off Sunrise, defendant caught on 2 camera angles. The state had the footage, the gun, the shirt, a prints off the counter. Everyone in the building was calling it a plea that just hadn't been signed yet. The defendant was a rapper, local, had real songs at one point before things went sideways for him. I'm going to call him Trigger Malone, because that's not his name. And if you already know who I mean, I'd ask you not to put it in the comments, and I already know you're going to anyway. Day one was ordinary. I want to say that plainly because everything I tell you after this depends on you trusting that I know what ordinary looks like in that building. 11 years. I know the sound of a courtroom running normally the way you know the sound of your own hallway at 2 in the morning. You don't have to think about it. You just know instantly when something in it is off. Jury selection went the way jury selection always goes, slow and irritable. Opening statements. The air conditioning fighting the August heat and mostly losing. Judge Harmon ran his courtroom quiet and fast the way he always did. I'd worked in front of him maybe 40 times over the years. Silver hair, half glasses, a voice that never got louder no matter what was happening in front of him. And there's one detail from day one I need to put down now, even though it didn't mean anything to me at the time, because it's going to matter later. And I don't want it to feel like I added it after the fact. The clerk poured Judge Harmon a fresh glass of water every session. Morning glass, afternoon glass, like clockwork. In something like 40 trials in front of that man, I had never once seen him drink from it, not a sip. By the end of a session, the water had usually gone a little cloudy, the way water does out of the pipes in a building that old. Everything just sits. And the clerk would clear it away and pour a new glass for the next session, like nothing was strange about that at all. I noticed it the way you notice anything you've seen 40 times without ever once asking why. It registered as a habit, a quirk. Furniture doesn't ask questions about the people it serves. It just notices them and files them away and moves on to the next thing that needs typing. That's where I want to start. Not with anything frightening yet, just a courtroom, a case that looked closed before it opened, and a glass of water nobody ever touched. Day 2 is when the smell started. Cigar smoke, faint, and under it something hot. The smell of a penny held to a lighter in a county building where you can't smoke within 50 feet of the doors. I blamed the HVAC crews. They'd been on the 6th floor all month, ceiling panels off in the corridor, and burnt dust off a motor is close enough to what I was smelling that my brain signed off on it and moved on. I even typed a note to myself in my personal steno file. Smoke smell, tell maint. I mention that little file now because it becomes important later. It's the only record from those 4 days that still says what I remember. Day 2 is also when I noticed the defendant's hands during the state's video, his own robbery playing on the big screen, him on camera holding a gun. Malone wasn't watching the screen. His head was down and his thumb was moving against the pads of his fingers, one at a time, in order, over and over, like a man counting something that wasn't there. And he was whispering, not to his lawyer, lower than that, I hear for a living. It wasn't English and it wasn't Spanish, and it repeated the same shape over and over, like a wheel going around. The prosecutor didn't react. The jury didn't react. Judge Harmon looked directly at him during the video. I watched him do it, and his face did nothing at all. Not one person in that room reacted to a man chanting through the evidence of his own armed robbery. My ex-husband's explanation later was that it was smaller and quieter than I remember, and I've inflated it since. Maybe. I've told this story wrong before, angrier, and I've cut those parts out. The chanting is what I'd swear to. Day 3, I stayed late, not out of curiosity, out of billing. My afternoon file corrupted. The rough draft was due to both attorneys by 7 a.m., and I had to rebuild the session manually from my steno notes in the building because the file wouldn't sync out. So I was in the reporter's workroom down the corridor until past 9, fixing a file so I could invoice for it. Sometime after 9, the smell came into the workroom. Strong now, cigar and hot copper. Strong enough that I got up to check if something electrical was burning. The corridor lights were at half power. The doors of 6C were closed, and there was light coming out from under them, warmer than fluorescent, moving. Each courtroom door has a small vertical window, wire glass, maybe 4 inches wide. I stood in the dark and looked through it, and this is everything I could see from where I stood and nothing more. Candlelight, the well of the courtroom, the open floor between the bench and the tables, and Malone in it. Out of custody, at night, in a locked county courthouse, kneeling with his suit jacket off. An older man I'd never seen stood over him, small, in a white guayabera, hands moving. On the floor between them, on what looked like a trash bag spread flat, something white was struggling. A bird, I'll say chicken, it was the size of a chicken, held down at the wings. The old man's hand went down and the bird went from moving to not moving, and then he flicked his wet fingers toward the bench 3 times, and the drops hit the front panel where the county seal is, and both men bowed. Not to the seal, that's interpretation, and I try to keep it out. They bowed toward the bench. The whole thing took under 2 minutes. No drums, no shouting, nothing a movie trained me to expect. It was quiet and efficient and administrative. It looked like a procedure. It looked like filing something. And the part that broke something in me permanently wasn't the bird. When I stepped back from the glass, there was a security guard at the far end of the corridor by the elevators, a man I knew in that building longer than me, looking at the same doors, at the same light. He saw me, and he gave me a small shake of the head. Tired, almost kind, the way you'd tell a coworker don't clock that in the break room. Then he got in the elevator, and the doors closed on him looking at the floor. I didn't call anyone, Go ahead and judge that. The building was locked. Somebody with keys had let those men in. And that head shake told me the list of people with keys was longer than I wanted to know about. So here's what I actually did after watching an animal die in the well of Courtroom 6C. I went back to the workroom, I finished my file, and I billed for it. Day 4. Closings ran short. The state walked the jury through the footage one more time. The defense said the word reasonable maybe 30 times, and the jury went out at 10:52 in the morning. I know the time because my machine knows the time. They were back at 12:23, 91 minutes. 11 years in that building, I never saw a jury come back that fast on a felony with video. Deliberation time doesn't go in the transcript. Nobody speaks it aloud, so nobody keeps it except the furniture. I kept it. The jurors filed in past my station, 3 feet from me, and that's when I saw the shoes. The third juror in had a fold of paper sticking up out of the back of her shoe at the heel, cream-colored, folded small. My first thought was that the renovation crews had papered the jury room with some notice, and she'd stepped on one. Then the 5th juror, then the 7th. By the time all 14 were seated, I had seen paper wedged in the heel of at least 9 of them. I'll only swear to 9. Folded the same way, riding the same spot, and every one of them walked like it wasn't there. 14 strangers, and not one of them stopped to shake out a shoe. I filed it under litter, under mess, under renovation, because that was the only shelf I had to put it on. I didn't get the right shelf until years later, and when I got it, I was driving and I had to pull over. But that's for the end. The foreperson handed the verdict to the bailiff to the clerk read it. Not guilty on all counts. A man who was on camera. My hands were writing it. My hands do that without me. And I looked up at Judge Harmon, pure reflex. The glance you give the person who speaks next, because the next words belong to him. Thank you for your service, ladies and gentlemen. I'd heard him say it 40 times. The judge was wrong. I've had years to find better language than that, and there isn't any. His shape was where it always was. Robe, glasses, silver hair. But it was like when a video stutters, and one frame belongs to a different video. The proportions were wrong. Too tall for sitting. The height he was, he would have had to be standing inside the bench through it. And over the face, I knew there was another face, longer, gray like wet newspaper, and the mouth came down too far, farther than a mouth goes. And it was looking at the defendant with an expression I can only describe as satisfied. Not angry, not hungry. Satisfied. The way you look at a signature drawing. And the glass. The fresh glass at his right hand, the one he never touched, had gone cloudy the way it always did. And the surface of it was trembling, rings moving across it, steady, the way water trembles near heavy machinery. There is no machinery in a bench. I had watched that glass for 4 days, and it had never moved once. Nobody reacted. I need you to understand that this is the whole horror and everything else. The bird, the chanting, the smell is just the hallway that leads to it. The clerk stapled something. The bailiff stood with his thumbs in his belt. 14 jurors looked up at that bench with paper in their shoes, and their faces polite and their hands folded. And Malone looked directly up at it, not at Judge Harmon, up at the height where the wrongness was, and he nodded, small, once, the way you nod across a room at someone you owe. And the thing behind Judge Harmon's face opened Judge Harmon's mouth and said, in Judge Harmon's ordinary, tired, never gets louder voice, "Thank you for your service, ladies and gentlemen." And my hands typed it, because that's what my hands are for. I've timed it since. against my keystroke log. The software timestamps every stroke. From the last word of the verdict to the first word of the thank you, there are 11 seconds of steady, clean, error-free typing. 11 seconds of strokes I have no memory of making. And then it was just Harmon again. Half glasses, silver hair, adjourning us. And the air conditioning hum rolled back over the room like a wave. And I realized the hum had been gone. I couldn't tell you when it left. I can only tell you it came back, and that every person in that courtroom had been sitting in perfect silence without one of them noticing, the way nobody notices the water, the way nobody notices the shoes, the way nobody ever notices. I didn't stand up until the room was empty. The clerk had to say my name twice. That night, I proofed the verdict day transcript so I could certify it, standard. And in the middle of the verdict, between the four persons not guilty and Harmon thanking the jury, there was a line I did not write, my formatting, my software. Sitting inside the 11 seconds my keystroke log can't explain. It was rendered as spoken dialogue, attributed to the court. And it said, the account is settled. The account is always settled. I drove in at 5 the next morning and pulled the courtroom audio back up, which we are not supposed to do. At that timestamp, the audio has Harmon thanking the jury, and underneath his voice, faint, there's one small sound 3 times. Tick, tick, tick. Like drops of water hitting a wooden panel. There is one sin in my profession. You don't take things out of the record. The record is the record. That's the entire point of me. I sat in my car in the parking garage for an hour. And then I went upstairs and I took the line out and I certified 31 pages with my name at the bottom of every one. The version with the line exists in exactly one place now. My personal steno file, the same file where I told myself to call maintenance about the smoke. My handwriting, so to speak. The only witness I have is me, and I already tampered with the evidence. Now the cost, because you should know what this actually took. I started refusing assignments in 6C, then in front of Harmon, then the whole 6th floor. There's no way to explain that to a chief judge. That doesn't end in a competency review. So I requested the review myself, thinking I could manage it. And I want to be honest about what happened in that room because everyone assumes my career ended over the courthouse story. And it didn't. I never told them the courthouse story. I was careful. I was doing fine. What ended it was one sentence that came out of me without permission. The doctor asked, gently, the way they do, whether I'd had any experiences like it since. And I heard myself say, yes, not in courtrooms, on television. I said I had seen it. The wrongness, the too tall, the gray face over the face. 3 more times since that day. Once on a man at a podium during a primary debate. Once in a boardroom photograph in a business magazine in her own waiting room. Once on an awards broadcast for about 4 seconds. On a face so famous that if I said the name, you'd stop believing every other word I've told you. And each time, everyone around them, the crowd, the cameras, the other faces at the table, kept acting normal, applauding, laughing, the way my courtroom kept acting normal. And the words that came out of me in that little office were, they're in the high rooms. They've always been in the high rooms. Nobody stops. You can't say that to a review board. I know that. I knew it while I was saying it. I surrendered my certification 8 months later, voluntarily, which is a word that does a lot of lifting. My husband stayed through the review and not much past it. I do medical transcription from my kitchen now. Flat rooms, nobody elevated, nobody behind a bench. The man I called Trigger Malone fell off hard a few years later, the way they do, The charges, the feuds, the songs stopped landing. And then last year, the interview. Found God laughing, telling the world about the offerings, the priest who told him what animal to bring, the case he beat on camera. And then he said the thing that made me pull my car over on the Palmetto with my hazards on. He said, you could put a person's name on a paper in the bottom of a shoe, and the work would go whichever way it was aimed. He said it like a man reading a recipe. 9 jurors, 91 minutes. I don't know whose name was on those papers. I never will. That's not the part I pulled over for. I pulled over because the 2 hosts were laughing, and the comments were laughing, thousands of them. The whole room acting normal, one more time, and me the only one with my face moving. Judge Harmon is still on the bench, re-elected twice. There's a campaign photo of him on a bus bench on Broward Boulevard, silver hair, half glasses, the flag behind him. And on the desk beside his hand, in the photo, there's a glass of water. It's cloudy. You can see it if you stop and look. Nobody stops.